The clang of a dropped wrench echoed through the corrugated metal walls of Raven's Auto and Supply, a humble garage on the edge of Ashridge, a sun-bleached desert town with a population that barely scraped 1,500. Outside, the horizon shimmered with heat waves. Inside, the smell of motor oil, sun-baked rubber, and fresh coffee mixed into an oddly comforting perfume. Behind the open hood of a battered 1996 Ford pickup stood Marina Vance, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back in a no-nonsense braid. She wore faded navy coveralls that bore faint scorch marks along one sleeve, marks no one had ever asked about, and she had no intention of explaining. 3 locals lounged in the open bay, sipping sodas from the corner store and pretending they weren't watching her work. One of them, a tall delivery driver with a permanent smirk, couldn't resist taking a jab. "You know, Vance, changing a belt's one thing, but don't start thinking you could ever work on real machines. Like the armored kind. That's a man's job." The laughter that followed was lazy, harmless in their minds, but it rolled off her like dust off a windshield. Marina only raised an eyebrow, wiped her hands on a rag, and muttered, "Yeah. Real machines. Got it." The men didn't notice how her movements were measured, deliberate, or how she occasionally glanced at the dusty corner of the shop where a locked steel cabinet sat, bolted to the floor. They didn't see the way she checked the clock, not out of boredom, but out of habit. At exactly 5 a.m. every morning, Marina opened the shop, brewed her coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and tuned an ancient radio to old blues. She specialized in everything the big city repair chains didn't bother with: rusted tractors, out-of-production farm trucks, generators salvaged from military auctions. No one in Ashridge knew that she'd once worn a different kind of uniform, with a name stitched not in thread but in the encrypted files of the U.S. Department of Defense. Back then, she was Hawk 12, a munitions systems engineer embedded with an elite rapid deployment response unit. The kind of unit that was sent in when the clock had already hit 0. That was a lifetime ago, or so she kept telling herself. But on this day, 12 hours after the offhand joke in her garage, the rumble of engines shattered the town's stillness. From the north, 6 matte black SUVs rolled in tight formation, their windows tinted dark enough to swallow sunlight. They pulled straight into her lot, blocking every exit. The driver's door of the lead vehicle opened, and a tall man in desert camouflage tactical gear stepped out. His voice was clipped, urgent, and left no room for misunderstanding. "Are you Hawk 12? The man's shadow stretched across the cracked concrete toward her, sharp and angular in the midday sun. Marina froze mid-motion, the wrench still in her hand. The only sound was the soft click of cooling engine metal from the Ford she'd been working on. No one had called her Hawk 12 in almost 8 years. "Depends who's asking," she said, keeping her tone casual but her grip on the wrench tight. Her eyes flicked past him. 2 more figures stepped out of the second SUV, their faces hidden behind mirrored shades. All wore sidearms and compact radios clipped to their vests. The man held up a black leather ID case, the insignia inside unmistakable: Special Operations Command. "Name's Major Ryland Cortez. We have a situation that requires your unique skill set. Immediate transport is necessary." She smirked faintly, though her pulse had spiked. "Pretty sure my skill set these days involves carburetors and brake pads." Cortez didn't smile. "This isn't a request." One of the locals still hanging around the base snorted. "What's all this about? Marina, you got secret government contracts or something?" She shot him a warning look, then set down the wrench, wiped her hands on her coveralls, and deliberately walked toward the shop office. "Give me a second," she called over her shoulder. Inside, behind a counter stacked with invoices and grease-stained manuals, was the steel cabinet. She unlocked it with a small key she kept on a chain under her shirt. From inside, she withdrew a plain, dented thermos. To anyone else, it looked like it held coffee. But when she twisted the lid halfway, a faint green diode inside blinked 3 times, then went dark, a deactivated personal signal jammer she'd built herself. If they were here for what she thought, she wouldn't be giving them free access to her digital trail. She stepped back outside, the thermos in one hand. "All right, Major," she said, eyeing the SUVs. "Where are we going?" "Zone Delta 7. 10 miles outside San Lorca. You'll be briefed en route." The words meant nothing to the locals, but Marina knew the area, an industrial district near the rail lines, largely abandoned after a chemical spill 5 years ago. Military cordon zones, no civilian access. Her jaw tightened. She locked the shop door behind her and followed Cortez toward the lead SUV. Inside, the air was cold, scrubbed clean by military-grade filtration. Across from her sat a younger soldier, maybe mid-20s, his eyes wide with both curiosity and respect. "I thought Hawk 12 was dead," he murmured. Marina leaned back, arms crossed. "Sometimes that's the point." The convoy moved out, engines humming in unison. She didn't ask questions, not yet. She knew how these things worked. They'd tell her only what she needed to know. But the tight formation, the choice of vehicles, the urgency, it was the same rhythm as the last time she'd been pulled into something like this. And last time, 5 of her team hadn't come home. The SUVs rolled through the heat haze, leaving the cracked asphalt of Ashridge behind for the desert road that cut toward the San Lorca Industrial District. Through the tinted glass, Marina caught glimpses of rusted freight cars, skeletal warehouses, and the hulking shapes of decommissioned cranes silhouetted against the sky. They reached a checkpoint manned by armed soldiers in full combat gear. Beyond it, the landscape changed, silence replaced the distant hum of traffic, and the air carried a faint metallic tang that clung to the back of the throat. A towering chain-link fence stretched along both sides of the road, its top coiled with razor wire. Cortez spoke for the first time since leaving the shop. 2 nights ago, an unauthorized drone entered restricted airspace over Delta 7. It crashed into an unused storage depot. That depot wasn't empty. Marina stayed quiet, letting him continue. Inside was an improvised electromagnetic pulse device, partially armed. Our tech secured it, but something about the build triggered a specific sequence in our threat recognition system. He handed her a secure tablet. On the screen was a close-up of a component, a circular metal housing with etched micro-markings along the rim. Her breath caught. The markings weren't random. They were a code she'd once used in her unit's classified munitions designs. "This isn't possible," she murmured. "That's a cold vault sigil. Nobody outside of Night Glass Division had access to that library." The younger soldier across from her leaned forward. "Night Glass Division? That's not in any." "Stop talking," she cut in sharply. The look on her face shut him up. Cortez met her eyes. "You were the lead systems engineer for Night Glass disarmament projects. Which means if someone is building devices with your specs, we have a breach we can't trace. And we can't defuse what they've built." The convoy slowed as they entered a broad, deserted lot surrounded by decaying warehouses. Dozens of uniformed personnel moved in tight, rehearsed patterns, cordoning off an area in the center. In that center sat a small, nondescript shipping container. 2 guards stood rigid on either side of it. "Inside," Cortez said, "is another device. Bigger. We've cleared 3 blocks in every direction. Clock's ticking." Marina exhaled slowly, her mind already parsing variables, trigger mechanisms, fail-safes, redundancy layers. But a cold realization formed in her gut. If someone was using Night Glass blueprints, they weren't just targeting infrastructure. They were targeting her. The steel doors groaned as a soldier swung them open, the hinges protesting from years of disuse. A wave of stale, chemical-laced air rolled out. Even before stepping inside, Marina could feel the faint vibration of something running, a hum too steady to be incidental. The interior was dim, lit only by 2 portable LED lamps clamped to the walls. In the center, on a reinforced pallet, sat the device. It wasn't crude. Whoever had built it had access to high-grade materials, military composites, precision machined casing, and cabling that looked freshly manufactured. She circled it slowly, her eyes narrowing. The external shell bore none of the usual handholds or seams. Instead, It had a smooth black finish, broken only by a small access port the size of a coin. "Where's your Yodi team?" she asked without looking up. Cortez answered from the doorway. "We had two. First team couldn't breach the shell without tripping a sensor. Second team tried thermal imaging, device heated in response. We backed off." Marina knelt, running her fingertips lightly over the surface. The hum grew faintly louder under her touch, feedback resonance. She tapped her temple in thought. "It's running a constant loop. Probably a biofeedback failsafe. Whoever's monitoring this will know if it's tampered with." She unzipped the side pocket of her coveralls and pulled out a battered cloth roll. Inside was a set of tools so specialized they didn't look like anything in a hardware store: custom thermal probes, a pressure-sensitive caliper, a flat sensor wand with etched copper tracery. The young soldier from earlier stepped closer. "What's that?" "Stuff that doesn't exist," she said and began. The next 5 minutes were pure silence except for the tiny clicks of her tools and the faint whirring inside the device. She located a concealed fastener, magnetically sealed, requiring a precise polarity shift to disengage. With a careful twist, the outer shell lifted half an inch, revealing the inner core. Her eyes locked on the heart of the bomb, a compact reactor coil surrounded by 3 separate triggering systems. And there, engraved along the primary stabilizer, were 3 letters, HVX. Her old signature. Not a copy. Not a forgery. The exact marking she'd used to authenticate her work inside Night Glass Division. She froze, her breath shallow. "Cortez," she said quietly, "this isn't just someone imitating my designs. This is one of mine." Cortez stepped closer, his voice low. "That's impossible. Every Night Glass device was dismantled, inventoried, and secured in Cold Vault Alpha." Marina didn't look up. "Apparently not every one." Her fingers moved on instinct now, even as her mind reeled. She had built only 3 HVX-class devices during her time in Night Glass. All of them were dismantled under her supervision. Each core was supposed to have been melted into slag under full security protocol. Someone had lied. She pulled a slim silver probe from her roll and slid it between 2 of the inner coil's mounting struts. A soft blue light traced along the probe's etched lines, flickering at intervals. "Secondary trigger," she muttered. "Proximity-based, maybe 5 inches radius." "That's why your UD team set it off just by getting close." One of the techs watching from the doorway whispered to Cortez, "Ma'am, is there a safe way to—" "Stop talking," Marina said sharply. "If I lose the rhythm, we're all going to see the inside of the sun." The coil assembly had 3 redundant triggers, 1 mechanical, 1 electromagnetic, and 1 chemical. Disarm 1, the other 2 activate. Disarm 2, the last one goes off automatically. There was only one way to bypass all 3, a technique she had never written down, never taught, never spoken aloud. Her hands moved in a blur. Left hand adjusting the pressure valve, right hand tilting the coil assembly 2 degrees counterclockwise, knee bracing the stabilizer plate. Then, with a slow exhale, she inserted the probe into the chemical trigger housing and rotated exactly 32 degrees. A faint click. The hum stopped. She straightened slowly, muscles in her shoulders tight as steel cables. The device now sat silent, inert. Cortez broke the silence. "That's it. That's it," she said, rolling up her tools. But her eyes stayed fixed on the HVX engraving. "I want a list of everyone who's had Cold Vault Alpha clearance in the last 10 years. And I want it yesterday." "Why?" the young soldier asked. Marina finally looked at him, her expression flat. "Because whoever's behind this didn't just steal one of my designs. They stole my ghost." The debrief took place in a small, dimly lit command tent hastily set up on the edge of the Delta 7 cordon. Maps lay scattered across the folding tables, red grease pencil marks circling potential strike points. Cortez's team moved in and out, carrying sealed crates containing the now disarmed device. Marina sat across from him, nursing a paper cup of bitter coffee. "We ran your request," Cortez said, sliding a folder across the table. Cold Vault Alpha's clearance list. We found something odd. She opened the folder. 37 names, each one underlined in green or red depending on status. Active, retired, deceased. Her gaze stopped halfway down. The name burned like acid in her mind. Lance Keating, status, MIA. Lance had been her second-in-command in Night Glass. Brilliant, unpredictable, with a knack for thinking his way through impossible traps. He'd vanished during an overseas operation 7 years ago. Everyone assumed he was dead. She'd believed it too, until now. It's him, she said quietly. Cortez frowned. You can't know that for sure. Oh, I can't, she replied. Because nobody else knew the HVX trick. And if Lance is alive, he's not on our side anymore. For a moment neither spoke. Outside, the wind stirred fine grit against the tent walls. Cortez finally said, We could use you, Hawk 12. Help us track him. Stop whatever he's building next. She shook her head. I've done my part. I came in, I took the teeth out of your monster, and now I'm going home. People could die if... People will die, she cut in. That's the ugly truth. But I'm not your soldier anymore. She stood, leaving the folder on the table. Cortez didn't try to stop her. By dusk, she was back in Ashridge, unlocking the weather door to Raven's Auto and Supply. The smell of oil and old wood wrapped around her like an old blanket. She hung her coveralls on the hook, turned on the radio, and poured herself a real cup of coffee. On the workbench sat a small package, no return address. Inside was a photograph of her old Night Glass unit, restored and framed, with a note written in a familiar hand. For the one who still knows where all the wires run. Marina stared at it for a long time before setting it face down. She didn't need the reminder. She went back to work. The next morning, the locals would come in with their busted engines and leaky radiators. They'd laugh, joke, and maybe underestimate her all over again. And she would smile, fix their problems, and send them on their way. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who looks like they've never left it.